Hey class, this is Nick Sensky at Iowa State University. Today's tutorial is going to talk about how to draw a section orthographically, uh, and it may be odd right now because I'm actually looking at Rhinoceros, which is a 3D modeler, but I want to use it to illustrate a point, which is essentially to talk about what sections are. So I've got an example here of a little like pavilion that I designed, just a really kind of a simple one. Um, and there's two drawings, and I've have a section cut here. So you can see this red line here represents where we're going to cut the pavilion. And these leading lines here are actually showing what direction we're facing. This is always important because when we make a drawing, even when you make a cut, you have to decide which direction you want to look with it, right? So if you're going to be looking on this side, which I've rendered in kind of a darker color here, the arrows are pointing this way. If in this design I want to look, this way, I have the leading arrows pointing this way. And knowing where your section line is really important because it determines, what you're going to see in the section. And some of the things we use sections for are we use a section to read the space in a building, to understand how like a person occupies that space. We use sections to show us the thickness of objects and the ways that they go together. So it talks about the construction process for the building and like the detailing of it. In particular, if we have a section that's really zoomed in, really high scale, like half-inch equals a foot or 1 inch equals a foot, we're really talking about construction details at that scale. The other thing we use sections for is to talk about light. You guys will be doing that in some of your other classes. So here's an example of a drawing. I'm going to go ahead and hide one of these guys for now. And don't worry about this stuff, what I'm doing in Rhino. I'm just using it as a tool to kind of talk about what the space looks like. So I'm just gonna kind of use this to illustrate my point. Just adjust my windows here. Let's actually just do this. Okay, so I've got. Oops. There we go. Okay. So you can see the drawing here, the red line, and here it's kind of floating above it. You can kind of ignore that for now. But you can see the red. You can see the pieces that I cut. That's what's actually happening. So you see this transparent piece. This is the stuff I cut away. This is what's left. And a section would be a view of it that looks basically like this. You can see the red, kind of poche. You can see the gap between the parapet, between the roof and the wall creates a clear story. And I've got this piece of the facade here that I've removed. I've got this partition. I've got another wall. I am cutting through a mullion in this case, which actually I really wouldn't want to be doing that. I really want to show this as reading clear. So I actually have a section that I wouldn't actually want to cut. You really don't want to. Oh no, as a matter of fact, my apologies. When I cut through this, I am cutting back here, so I am actually cutting through the wall. This is a little odd because I have all this stuff in the front. If I go ahead and hide this, then I've got my true section. Yeah, this is actually what it would be. Okay. And this is like rendered. It's in the computer. It has these shadows. You really don't see this kind of stuff in a drawing. I just wanted to illustrate the point of what's happening like three-dimensionally, right? So you would actually draw the things that are behind the section. You don't need to shade them though if you're doing a drawing, because again, the shading in this case is what would happen if I actually did cut this in half, and that's not really real. That's not really the way that you would see it. So don't get confused by that. Let me go ahead and actually, as a matter of fact, go back to this here. But this is what happened. So I cut it with this imaginary line. I'm looking in this direction, and the red pieces are what are left. Let's go ahead and look at the other one really quickly, just so we can get a sense of what that actually looks like here. And again, I'm just using this Rhino model as a visual example of what's happening in this section. I'm going to hide the grid too. There we go. A little bit less confusing for us. Okay. again, I've got the now this one is cut, in this direction here, and in this case, I am showing a cut through this door here. I have this doorway that is kind of on a pivot. It's kind of a panel. I am cutting through the window, and I'm cutting through the mullions here, and I'm also showing the other clear story on this side. Okay, and let me go ahead, and I won't make the mistake that I did last time and hide this stuff, and then I'll look at this from the left side. Pardon me. Okay, and this is what this one looks like, and this is a little bit confusing. You can see in wireframe, this is kind of what the drawing is. There's a partition here, like a low partition, and then there's a little kind of design in the back wall. And so when I'm looking at it this way, you kind of see the bits of that, but you don't see the lines. This isn't really showing the lines very well, but I am showing the fact that I'm cutting through this door. It has thickness. There's like a lintel, and then there are these mullions here that are inset into a larger vertical mullion, and then there's this wall. And in sections, I want to be clear about this. You never want to cut through a column. So if I had a column in here, I would not want to take a section line and put it in there such that I would cut through a column, because a column is going to make a box in the space, and you actually want to read the space that you can move through. You'd really want to read the floor and the roof, or the floor and the ceiling and another floor. A column is going to create like a box, and it's not going to help you. It's not going to help that read. So in the same way, I would not cut through a mullion, a vertical mullion, because it's not going to help me read how we go through the space. If I cut through these horizontal mullions, it does actually show how this is broken up, and that light can pass through it. And that's what you want to be working with when you're in your other class. You want those kinds of drawings. This would be a drawing you could use to study the light in the space. The section line, like where you cut a section from, is really important. Let me go ahead and just hide these again. You always want to take a section through, important objects, whether you're doing something spatially or whether you're doing something in terms of the light or in terms of construction. Where you cut a section matters. If you cut a section just straight across something, halfway, you may or may not get the elements that you want in your section. In this case, like for this section, I was very strategic that I did not cut the vertical mullion, as I said. I would probably not cut straight through our partition again, because it's not going to help you. But you might cut through, a doorway. I definitely cut through, this doorway here. Cutting through a window is good because it will show you that kind of space. In this case, I cut through the partition halfway, the clear story, and this kind of funky window design, because I wanted to get a sense of how that space reads. Sections are really helpful because they just immediately clarify those kinds of conditions for us. Even when I have a digital model like this, having the simplified section drawing, having things that are very, very clear in 2 dimensions is immensely helpful, particularly if you know how to read a section as a designer. So sections are really valuable tools. The other thing I want to talk about really quickly before we actually move on to drawing it is the idea that, I've shown you a couple examples of sections. You can absolutely draw a section, draw a section diagonally through something, fine, right? As long as it's meaningful to you, in the design, you can do that. There's nothing that says it has to be a particular angle, although orthographic is usually expected. In a building, I'll make a little point of something here. A little vocabulary here. So, if we had a building that's rectangular, right? Something that has, these are square. A section that we would draw that would go this way is called a cross section. You've heard of that before, right? And a section cut the opposite way would be a longitudinal section, or a transverse section. Usually it's a transverse section. Okay, so cross section, transverse section. Okay, is a little bit of vocabulary there. All right, so that's the gist of you know what sections are, how they're represented in design, and what we can do with them. In the next part, we'll go ahead and move on, and we will actually draw sections, starting with the plans and the elevations.